This is an opportunity for you to provide your side of the story.
Picture the scene. You've been called to the headmaster's office because he's been told you've been a very, very naughty boy. Stevenson, let's start with you.
We are profoundly, and I think I would say unreservedly, sorry.
McKillop?
I made a full apology, unreserved apology.
And how about you, Goodwin?
I apologised in full and I'm happy to do so again.
And Hornby, what have you got to say for yourself?
We are extremely sorry.
You may not be surprised to learn that John McFall, Labour MP and the subject of our profile this week, is a former deputy headmaster. Last week, McFall, the former teacher of chemistry and maths, took to task the bankers who had got their sums catastrophically wrong. For more than 7 years, he's been chairman of the Treasury Select Committee of MPs. Now he's leading, with some relish, the inquisition of the former masters of the financial universe. McFall never was a man to mess with. In his 15 years of teaching, he was a no-nonsense disciplinarian. Mr. McFall was a master known to be handy with the belt, as one of his former pupils, Jim Murphy, remembers. Mr. Murphy happens to be a fellow Labour MP and Secretary of State for Scotland.
I've known John McFall most of my life. He was deputy head teacher of my school, Bellarmine Secondary School in Pollock. It's a school that's now a shopping centre, but I've got great memories of that school. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that school, and I know that's the case for John. John was, I think he was chemistry and maths as well, so he did a lot of things. And the way I joke about it is I think John as the deputy would give the boys the belt, because that was a time when that was allowed. And the next time I kind of came into any contact with John was when I got to Parliament a good few years later, and he'd gone from the deputy head teacher that gave people the belt to being my government whip, which was a kind of, life had gone a full circle. But John is just a gentleman.
He was referred to as Falza. That's the name I recall.
That memory of Falza comes not from one of John McFall's pupils, but from a classmate and long-standing friend, Francis Balmer. He remembers Falza's gritty determination during difficult times.
His mother had a shop in Dumbarton, small newsagent shop, which John did a lot of work in. He would deliver the papers, and I think he also got a few free cigarettes at the time. That was in the days when cigarette smoking wasn't as frowned upon as it is now. He worked hard because his mother didn't keep him good health. His father didn't keep him good health either. He became an invalid. He lost his legs, I think, through peripheral vascular disease. And as a result, John obviously had to do a lot for his parents. He was a very dutiful son.
McFall was born 64 years ago in Dumbarton, a shipbuilding town close to Glasgow. He left school as soon as he could and worked for the local council, pulling up weeds for the Parks Department. But he wasn't prepared to settle for a life of manual labour. In his 20s, he studied for a degree in chemistry at Paisley College, added a business degree and trained to be a teacher. He also got married to Joan. 4 children were to follow. And as if that wasn't enough, he threw himself into local Labour Party politics. The result, a domestic juggling act which sometimes went wrong. His old friend Francis Balmer recalls McFall's overfilled diary and a clapped-out car, which made for constant stress.
The car broke down and was beyond repair. So here he was, stuck in Glasgow. He had to phone his wife. She said, I thought you were down at the teachers' meeting. He says, actually, he had to confess that he had nipped off to the Labour Party cooperative meeting in Glasgow. So he was in the bad books, and when I phoned him the next day to find out about the car, he said, oh, don't mention anything. I've been hoovering, polishing floors and washing dishes to get back in the good books with my wife, you know.
The Catholic Church and the Labour movement, both have been pillars of John McFall's life. The Labour Party in the west of Scotland is often described as a political machine, but John McFall was never a socialist firebrand in the tradition of Red Clydeside. In fact, even when he stood as Labour candidate in Dumbarton in 1987 and won, he was memorably unmoved. Jim Murphy.
The day after he got elected, he went back to school, and he was in the staff room because it was the day before mobile phones. He went back to the staff room and he said, well, someone will contact me when I've got to get to Parliament. But he went back to school the next day. It's just John, it's again a sense of service. Yes, I was elected yesterday, but I'm still a school teacher until I know that I've got to be in Parliament for the first time ever, perhaps the following Monday.
John McFall spent 12 years as an MP on the opposition benches. He was a Labour whip and a spokesman on Scottish affairs. He's always been hard to pigeonhole. He opposed the first Iraq War of 1991, and yet he supported the second one in 2003. He has a quixotic streak. He's always championed animal rights, and back in 1995 he expressed particular concern for the welfare of the hedgehog.
In terms of the law, there is no difference between a soccer ball and a hedgehog, in that a soccer ball can be kicked about by young people, a hedgehog can be kicked about, doused with petrol, set alight, and I think it's time the law was changed to reflect that.
John McFall backed Tony Blair for the Labour Party leadership, and when Blair swept to power, he seemed destined for a career in government. He went to the Northern Ireland office as junior minister, but when the department was slimmed down as a result of devolution less than 2 years later, the Prime Minister didn't find McFall a new post. His friend Francis Balmer.
I think he was disappointed, but he picked himself up. He was determined not to let it get him down, and he felt it's something still to give, and he's found his niche, obviously, in the job he's doing, except the kind of vicissitudes of life and the ups and downs, and the fact that you don't always get what you want in politics.
John plays off 14, and I had a decent drive. He put it on the green. We were down in 2 putts, and they put pressure on them. And if I remember correctly, their ball landed in the car park.
Tory MP Andrew Mackay is a golfing buddy of John McFall. Both are pillars of the Parliamentary Golfing Society.
I think he was a bit worried he wasn't on the front bench. And I remember having a discussion with him, and he wasn't sure whether to take up the chairmanship of the Treasury Select Committee. And I said, well, it's a big, powerful job if you make it so, John. And I think there are a few people today who can think of the names of half the junior ministers in this government, but they all know who John McFall is, and I think he made the right call.
McFall's ability to operate beyond party lines was to come into its own on the Treasury Select Committee, and while much of its work might have gone unnoticed during the economic good times, that all changed 18 months ago. BBC Business editor Robert Peston.
It seems to me that he's had a pretty good run, actually, as chairman of the Treasury Select Committee. With all of us who are, interested in things to do with business, sort of right place, right time, as it were. I mean, we're all, the whole world is more interested in the economy and finance than it was 18 months ago. But, he's been very astute in the way that he has made sure that his committee looks at the issues that matter.
The parliamentary committee system works best when it isn't hobbled by partisanship or self-promotion, but is based on MPs prepared to do their homework. And as we know, John McFall has always had a thing about homework. Alf Young, a columnist on the Glasgow Herald, has followed John McFall's political career from the start.
If you're going to take on the bankers and take on fund managers and take on the other groups that he's taken on as chair of that committee down the last few years, you've got to understand how that world works.
So he sort of had to teach himself.
Yeah, absolutely. And in working class communities like the west of Scotland, that kind of curiosity, that self-improvement, that desire to understand complex areas of human behaviour from first principles, that's really quite strong and has always been quite strong. The workers in shipyards and down mines, who formed little societies in their communities and taught themselves about economics. And he's shown he has the capacity to get his head round split capital trusts or the vagaries of taxation, or now what a collateralised debt obligation actually is, and to challenge the people, many of whom I suspect, even at the highest levels in boardrooms around the world, some of them weren't too clear about what they were dealing in.
In his dealings with Britain's top bankers, fallen or otherwise, McFall, the committee chairman, has been calm, courteous and cutting. He has presence, a silver mane and a gift for a withering phrase, something he may well have perfected in his previous profession. Andrew Mackay.
Oh yes, he's every inch the school teacher. the schoolmaster, really. I can see him in the classroom, very much so. Because I think he has the thoroughness and the patience and the deep respect that all the best of that profession have. And I think that if you go back to that old television programme when I was a kid, What's My Line, they'd have spotted John pretty quickly. Perhaps you do need a headmaster, of course, or a strict teacher there chairing the Treasury Select Committee.
It's more like a courtroom than the headmaster's study. You do feel that you're being judged.
A few days ago, Robert Peston appeared before McFall's committee, at issue whether his reporting had made the financial crisis worse.
Is it a case for journalists to exercise self-restraint and temporarily delay publication of a story, perhaps for a few hours or a day or two, or there is a risk that immediate publication would trigger widespread market turbulence or lead to the collapse of a particular institution? Robert.
Well,
sorry, I just picked you at random.
When I was invited to appear, I sort of kidded myself that it was all going to be a stress-free, interesting chat about the things that matter to me. Actually, when you get into that room, you don't feel all that relaxed, really. And you just realise at that moment that you've got to weigh your words very carefully, because this is a terrific opportunity to put your foot in your mouth, and the whole world will know.
And last week it did feel like the whole nation, if not the world, was watching as McFall turned his acid tongue on former RBS chairman Sir Tom McKillop.
Now, what exactly are you apologising for? And we've been told that you've been coached extensively, meticulously by PR people, and lots of money has been spent. The papers tell us that, Sir Tom. So, are you expressing sympathy because your PR advisors advise you to do so?
No.
No wonder these recently unemployed bankers left McFall's committee room looking distinctly queasy. Former McFall pupil, now government minister, Jim Murphy.
He conducts himself in that Treasury Select Committee chairmanship more like the head teacher than the deputy head teacher, reprimanding people for kind of pretty disreputable behaviour, taking risks with other people's well-being, and gambling for the sake of short-term bonuses. And John's got a great ability to see through the waffle and cut through it. But I know how those bankers felt, because I've had John's treatment myself in the past.
With the financial crisis still unfolding and the recession deepening, John McFall is likely to remain close to the centre of the political action. But his term as chair of the Treasury Select Committee will be over when this Parliament ends. And then what? Alf Young of the Glasgow Herald raises an intriguing possibility.
I would have thought, government would want somebody inside the tent at board level or wherever, actually looking at how these banks were delivering for their major shareholder. And I can think of a few better qualified candidates, if that's what they are thinking, than someone like John McFall, who could very readily sit on the boards of either as a custodian of the taxpayer's interest.
Late in his career, John McFall has found the spotlight and is clearly enjoying it. And this teacher-turned-politician has found himself a mission. He wants the whole country to learn a lesson from what has happened to the banks.